Hey everybody, it's GauntletX, and welcome back to some more Magic Arena, and today we're going to be playing another quick draft of the Brothers War. Without further ado, let's get into our Pack 1 Pick 1, which is a pretty simple one. We've got a great rare with an Urza's Command here. It's a really flexible instant. It's a little bit of card advantage. It's a pretty beefy creature if you've got a good amount of artifacts for that Construct token, or it can even be some mana ramp with that Powerstone token, or a combat trick with a -2/-0. So it's a very flexible card and a pretty solid one at that. So I think I'm pretty happy to start with Urza's Command here. If you really don't like blue in this format, you could go for like Key to the City here, I guess, as a way to sneak in some unblockable damage, but I'm not super high on this card. There's a lot of solid uncommons I would take over it, but our pack is pretty weak otherwise. I think Pyrrhic Blast is kind of a lot of mana. Bushwhack, being a fight spell rather than a bite spell, does put your creature at risk of dying in the trade, so it's not the greatest removal ever. It's a little bit narrow, so that's not a super high pick for me either. Nor is Demolition Field or any of the commons, so really just one of the rares here, whichever strikes your fancy, but we're going to start with Urza's Command. Pack 1 pick number 2 now, we have one of my favorite commons, one of the most premium, which is Boulder Branch Golem. Incredible way to stabilize in the late game in any deck. As long as you can make it to 7 mana, you're going to get a 6/5 on the board, and you're going to gain 6 life. If you're in a green deck, it's even better, because it's a bit flexible. If you can't make it to 7 mana, still slam down a 3/3 and gain a few life, so big fan of Boulder Branch Golem, especially in a format that has these Powerstone tokens to help ramp into your high mana value artifacts. So I'm going to go with Boulder Branch Golem here, but there's a few other reasonable options competing. Loran, Disciple of History is a decent value play, picking up an artifact from her grave when you cast her, and then Ravenous Gigamole is another nice little graveyard recursion spell, as is Emergency Weld. These both can be decent little 2-for-1 value plays. So I think those are probably the best cards in the pack, although Sentinel Stalwart does lend itself towards a really fun archetype in the format, which is just a green-based deck with a bunch of copies of Sentinel Stalwart, and that lets you play just a ton of artifacts that have off-color Unearth effects. So you can, get your blue mana if you need it, your red mana if you need it, your black mana if you need it, splash in a little bit of everything if you pick up a bunch of Sentinel Stalwart. So it's a fun option too, but I'm definitely just going to go with the Boulder Branch Golem. Pack 1, pick 3, I'm pretty happy to take a Scrapwork Mutt here. I love these flexible colorless cards. They fit into literally any deck. If you have a little bit of mana fixing like an Energy Refractor or a Chromatic Sphere or Chromatic Star, anything like that, then you could also splash in their Unearth effects, but these cards are okay without the Unearth and really good with the Unearth. So really happy to take a Scrapwork Mutt here. It's a pretty open pick. If we wanted to kind of lock in here, we could take like a Take Flight to get a nice little card draw engine in blue, just lock into that color. Or we could just take one of these stronger off-color cards like Ambush Paratrooper or something tends to play pretty well. But I like staying pretty open pretty early in artifact-focused sets like this one. And here we have multiple good options for colorless spells between Scrapwork Mutt and Energy Refractor, so it's going to be hard to convince me to take anything other than those. For pick 4 now, the best blue spell is going to be the Archaeologist here. These little self-mill cards like the Archaeologist and the Gigamole that we saw earlier do play pretty well in a format that has Unearth as a primary mechanic. So with your Archaeologist, you can mill a few cards, maybe get lucky and draw into an Urza's Command. If not, maybe you randomly mill one of your Unearth cards like Scrapwork Mutt and get some value that way. So these cards play pretty well, but there's also a Boulder Branch Golem again, and I'm just going to be taking that here. For pick 5, we've got a bunch of pretty narrow spells. We probably take Epic Confrontation since we do have 2 gigantic Boulder Branch Golems that can fight relatively well with it, but it is kind of mediocre removal as most fight spells are in general. There's just not much else competing with it in this pack. There's a Gnawing Vermin for self-mill if we want to push into another color. Don't think it's strong enough really to get us into a different color to take it, and these blue spells are just not very exciting. So just take something in green with the Boulder Branches maybe. Grab an Epic Confrontation. For pick 6, we've got another pretty solid Unearth value play, and that's the Scrapwork Rager, drawing you a card when you play it and when you unearth it later in the game. Probably take that here. Not the greatest card in the universe, because it is a little expensive, 4 mana for the 2/2 and then 4 mana again to unearth. But there's nothing else really good in this pack. I have been impressed by Aeronaut's Wings now and then. because it's a card I disregarded a lot early in the format, but eventually going back for all these flashback quick drafts, I started putting like one copy in some random decks, and it ended up being pretty good as like the final addition to the deck. Maybe randomly send a Boulder Branch Golem in the sky, finish off a game that way. It does break through board stalls well, so I don't hate Aeronaut's Wings. That might be my second favorite card in the pack, honestly. I think the power suit's just really inefficient. Sentinel doesn't do anything. Liquid Metal Coating takes too much work, really, to make it actually work with disenchants and stuff like that. Just a bunch of really narrow cards here, so I'm just going to take the Rager. But Wings gets an honorable mention there, I guess. For pick 7, I'm very happy to take what is basically a much more efficient version of the Scrapwork Rager. The Combat Courier also draws us 2 cards off of the 1 card. We draw a card when we sack it the first time for 2 mana, and then we draw a card again when we unearth it for 1 and sack it for 2. So whenever we've got 3 extra mana later in the game, we just exile this from our grave, basically, and draw another card. So I do like Combat Courier a good amount, and it's in blue towards the Urza's command, which is pretty nice as well. Evolving Wilds can be a decently high pick in this format, again, for all of the off-color unearth effects that you might be splashing in. And outside of that, there's a really good aggro card, the Goblin Blast Runner. There's a good amount of sacrifice synergies in the format, so Blast Runner plays very well in like Rakdos sacrifice aggro decks. For us here, it's going to be Combat Courier. For pick 8 now, sticking on color with blue, we could take Machine Over Matter as the best blue spell. It's actually very efficient interaction in this format, because almost any deck is going to have a good amount of artifact creatures, so just 1 mana to bounce any non-land permanent can play really well. All kinds of ways to use this. Bounce your own card when they try to destroy it with removal, bounce one of their blockers when they go for a double block and just eat the other creature for free. Or do you just want to slow them down? If they drop a 6-drop, put it back in their hand, make them spend their next turn recasting it. A lot of great ways to use the card. It is very nice, and we could take it here, sticking on color with Combat Courier and Urza's Command, but we've also got some really solid colorless options. The most colorless is the Ichor Wellspring, which you definitely want to have ways to sacrifice, so it's a little narrow, even if it is colorless. And then there's Mishra's Research Desk, which is narrow in the sense that you do have to have the red to unearth it, but it is excellent, excellent value. It's a 2 for 1. It's 2 pieces of card draw. You look at the top 2, put whichever one you want into exile and cast it till the end of your next turn. So you have plenty of time to cast whatever you exile, and you get to do that again when you unearth it. So getting 2 pieces of card draw. I'm going to take the Mishra's Research Desk here. I think it's actually really good card selection, card draw, all that good stuff. But Machine Over Matter is my second favorite, and Wellspring probably in third place here, just because you do have to pick up some sacrifice synergies with that. And pick 9 here is where things tend to dry up. Now, everyone in the draft pod has seen the pack and taken something out of it, so not too much left at this point. But since we are 2 kind of half cards towards red now between the Mutt and the Research Desk, I think Sibling Rivalry will be perfectly fine as the choice here. It's the strongest card in the pack in its respective strategy, because, as I said before, there's some pretty good sacrifice synergies in the format, so you can steal your opponent's biggest creature and sack it against them. Plus, this is a set with the giant prototype artifact creatures like Boulder Branch Golem, so you can also just end up in some games where you steal a 6/5 and beat your opponent in the face with it. So Sibling Rivalry, I think, is the strongest card in the pack, and we are at least eyeballing red a little bit, so not the most speculative pick in the universe. For pick 10, if we do end up playing green, we already have top end with 2 Boulder Branches. I don't think I'm probably going to end up with room for Pallbearer, so I'll just take my favorite off-color card, which is Emergency Weld, for some pretty good graveyard recursion. Although Disenchant's perfectly playable in this format with the number of artifacts running around. For pick 11, I'm really happy to take an Energy Refractor. This is the pretty good glue that holds together all of your random off-color artifact abilities, mainly all those off-color unearths, but it's a really, really solid card. It replaces itself in value the second you play it. It hits the board and you draw another card, so you hit whatever you were going to draw if you didn't draw into Refractor anyway. And then, again, once you get to the late game and you've got nothing else to do with your mana, and make sure you've got whatever colors you need to unearth whatever cards you have. Pick 12, we've got the Archaeologist here, which works pretty great with Unearth spells, which we do have quite a lot of now. We've got Combat Courier, Research Desk, Scrapwork Mutt, and Scrapwork Rager. So Archaeologist for the self-mill seems decent, and it might also draw an Urza's Command or something if we're lucky, so take the Archaeologist here. Surprisingly, over the rare, Cloud Key's a really cool card to build around in Constructed, but it just doesn't do enough for its mana cost in a competitive 1v1 draft format. Pick 13 now. Never going to play the Fall of Krug, never going to play Latnam Adept for its just inefficiency, so we'll just take the Moment of Defiance combat trick because at least it's a combat trick that draws you a card when you cast it, so it immediately replaces itself in value. And here we'll take a Mine Worker for a filler colorless creature. That's going to do it for pack number 1. For pack 2, I don't really love these uncommons yet again. Urza just being kind of slow for the mana cost, and the splitting the Powerstone and the Fall of Krug I think are just completely unplayable. They're really narrow, really strange abilities overall for a limited environment. It's a pretty good rare here, but requiring triple white is a very hard sell, especially when our deck looks the way it does right now, where it's a bunch of artifacts and cards in 4 or 5 different colors. So don't think we're going to be playing triple of any color, really, in our deck. So that brings us down to pretty much the commons here, and we've got several decent options. Blanchwood Prowler sticks to green as an early card that can fill our grave for Unearth and pick up some lands to help us keep hitting lands on curve to get all the way up to 7 mana for cards like Boulder Branch Golem. So I like the Blanchwood Prowler here. There's also Gix's Caress. We're not as deep into black as green, potentially, but this is solid hand disruption, giving you that Powerstone token when you play it as well, so it helps ramp into all of your artifacts. And then there's the Machine Over Matter that I already talked about in blue. That's just a great little piece of interaction. I'm going to go for the Blanchwood Prowler here, though. I like getting more self-mill with all the Unearth going on. Pack 2, pick 2, there are 4 main options for the way that our deck is shaping up, and those are going to be Combat Courier for another great value play. We can cast it no matter what since it is colorless, but it's also got the great Unearth value. Then there's the Elsewhere Flask, which can be good fixing for all of our Unearth splashes and stuff, because we play this, draw a card out of it immediately, and whenever we need our off-color mana, we just sack this and make our lands all that land type. There's also the Bushwhack, which can get a random basic land that we need from our deck while being potentially a mediocre removal spell when we need it. So I think these 3 are really excellent options. And then, of course, there's a Blanchwood Prowler again if we just want another copy of that. I'm just going to take another Combat Courier. I really love this card in the early game, keeping things smooth, making sure you're doing things with your mana, getting some value, stopping some damage because you can chump block and then draw a card off of this. Just really helps helps the game keep rolling and keeps you doing stuff. Pack 2, pick 3 now. We've got several great options. Combat Courier for more colorless card draw, and of course the great Unearth value. There's a Sentinel Stalwart for more fixing, which could be nice because we're splashing in a lot of stuff here. I do think I'm probably going to end up cutting down all of the actual colored spells to being 2 main colors and then just a bunch of Unearth splashes. So I don't think Sentinel Stalwart's the most necessary thing in the world, but it would give us a little more options for taking even more splashy stuff if we want. There is also a Mightstone's animation that can buff up any of our Powerstone tokens, our non-creature artifacts, or even just our 1/1 artifact creatures like Combat Couriers. That's a pretty solid play as well. I think I'm going to stay pretty flexible here and take the Combat Courier. And I suppose, like, we've got enough colorless spells here and a couple potential black spells that pushing deeper into black would be an option too with one of these solid pieces of interaction. Hand disruption like Gix's Caress or removal like Disfigure. But I'm going to keep taking a bunch of great artifacts. Take the Combat Courier here. If anything wheels here for us, it's most likely, I think, to be the Sentinel Stalwart. I'd be pretty happy with that. But I don't think anything's going to wheel. There's enough pretty mediocre cards like Thopter Architect and Honor Guard and Scrapsmith. Those are probably the only ones left when the pack comes back, but we'll see. For pick 4 now, we've got a real good Unearth count. We're at 4, 5, 6. Oh, not Mine Worker. Scrapwork Rager. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6 Unearth cards. So the self-mill cards like Archaeologist are still looking really nice. So I think I'm going to pick that up here. Because there's nothing else in blue or green, really. The 9 mana, 9/9 is just a ton of mana. The 10 mana, 10/10. Yes, they've got the flexibility of coming out as like a 6 mana, 6/6 or 5 mana, 3/5, but both of those are also pretty mediocre bodies for the mana cost. So I'll take the Archaeologist here, and we are not going to be deep enough into one color, I think, to want one of the cards like Flow of Knowledge that wants you to have a ton of lands of one specific basic land type. But it is good if you are super, super deep into blue. Pack 2, pick 5. Well, we passed up on a Sentinel Stalwart earlier, and that means now we're very happy to take an Energy Refractor, although Iron Claw Crusher can be a massive threat at either mana cost, so it's worth considering, but I'm going to pretty happily take Energy Refractor. Pack 2, pick 6. Now we can splash and Disfigure or take another Energy Refractor. Perfectly happy to take a third Refractor here. And now for pack 2, pick 7, we get to live the magical dream in terms of our mana fixing here, because now we can take a Sentinel Stalwart or a Bushwhack, have perfect mana, and just start taking the best card in the pack throughout the entirety of pack 3, just regardless of color. Either of these would be a perfectly reasonable way. I do prefer the Sentinel Stalwart as the fixing, because with Sentinel Stalwart, we don't actually have to put a basic Plains into the deck or a basic Mountain into the deck to splash in random Unearth effects, but with Bushwhack, we would, and then we would have games where like drawn to a Plains with no white spells in the deck, just for like some white Unearth card. So rather have the Stalwart or the Bushwhack. And then there's the Iron Claw Crusher again for more beef, but let's get the fixing really set up here with how things have gone, of getting the 3 Refractors and now some Stalwarts. We can really do whatever we want in terms of casting everything we pick up for the rest of this draft. Unfortunately, pack 2, pick 8 doesn't really have any spells that I want to cast. There's just like Goblin Blast Runner for something actually good, and that's only good in a deck that has a lot of sacrifice abilities like Rakdos aggro. Nothing else in the pack I think is really gonna be making the cut. They're all pretty mediocre. I guess I'll go with Third Path Savant for being on color, being a card draw engine potentially. It's kind of cute. And now that we're at pick 9, again, we're at that point where the packs are pretty dry, so unlikely to see anything good. This pack is no exception to that. It's all pretty mediocre. Pick number 10, also pretty mediocre, but we do see an Elsewhere Flask for additional fixing potentially if we need it. It's also another one of the artifacts that draws a card when it hits the board and then just sits there. So it's pretty good with like Mightstone's animation if we get that later. Could take the Aeronaut's Wings as well, but I do still think I want Elsewhere Flask higher than Aeronaut's Wings. And we do get the Mightstone's animation later. Actually a bit of a difficult pick though, because we wield Mightstone's animation and Sentinel Stalwart. Hopefully triple Energy Refractor plus 1 Stalwart is good enough here, because I do love the idea of Mightstone's animation in a deck that has mainly 3 copies of Energy Refractor, but it's also quite good with the Elsewhere Flask, and of course any Power Stones we manage to get. So I'll take the animation over the Stalwart. I think the fixing is hopefully good enough here without the second Stalwart, and maybe we'll get lucky and we'll open up another Stalwart in the final pack to get passed to us. Throw some stuff in the sideboard as we move on to pack number 3. And I guess I should probably finally move some of the just unplayable cards we have in the main deck right now to the sideboard as well. Like Calamity's Wake. That's kind of it, right? Everything else is at least playable. Does something when we cast it. Yeah, there's stuff we'll probably cut, like some Mind Workers, but leave all that in for now. Alright. Well, we've set ourselves up to be able to splash things in really well with the triple Refractor and the Stalwart, but awkwardly enough here, the best card in this pack, regardless of color, for this deck is pretty easily Thopter Mechanic. Our deck is really good at drawing a second card each turn to trigger this, so that it's going to be a really beefy 2-drop, and whenever it trades off, it leaves a 1/1 flyer behind, so it's a 2-for-1 no matter what. Really, really good card, especially when you have 3 Combat Couriers and 3 Energy Refractors and an Elsewhere Flask, and a Mightstone's animation, and an Urza's Command. There's so many ways to trigger this card in our deck. It's going to be fantastic, and we take it over what could be a fun splash of like Queen Caleb and Krug, because Thopter Mechanic's just going to be better. More consistent for sure. For pack 3, pick 2 here, we are at the point where we have a great amount of mana fixing and a pretty mediocre amount of interaction like removal spells and stuff, so I think I'll splash in an Excavation Explosion here for some removal. The great thing about this being that it's early game removal that also ramps into our top end Boulder Branch Golems. Pack 3, pick 3, again, doing super great on mana, not super great on interaction, and Skyfisher Spider is excellent interaction. We've got some of the really good combos for it as well. We can play this, sack something, blow something up, and then if we trade this off or chump block with it, we can emergency weld it to get a 1/1 on the board and put it back in our hand, then we recast it, sack that 1/1 to blow something else up. Really like the Skyfisher Spider quite a lot, but Scrapwork Cohort is another incredible card. Probably the best of the scrap cards. It's kind of tied with the Scrapwork Mutt, just because that one's really cheap. But Scrapwork Mutt, Scrapwork Cohort, Combat Courier, all these Unearth artifacts are incredible. This one leaving you with a little army of 1/1 soldiers, which is quite great as well. But we're going to take the removal spell of Skyfisher Spider for the splash. Okay, so now that we have taken an Excavation Explosion and a Skyfisher Spider, we're getting to a decent amount of interaction here. We could still use more, so we could still definitely utilize an Excavation Explosion or a Disfigure, but I really like Scrapwork Cohort, and I am going to take that here. Get a good amount of stats onto the board for pretty cheap, makes it really hard for your opponent to attack in and break through all this. Plus, it gives you that great value later, unearthing, getting another soldier permanently while chipping away for a few damage to your opponent, because they're never going to want to block that with anything with 3 or less toughness, because it's just going to die in your end step anyway, so really do love Scrapwork Cohort here. Pack 3, pick 5. We are deepest into blue and green for Battery Bearer as a signpost uncommon, but we are not a good deck for this card, because we just don't have that many artifact spells with mana value 6 or greater. We've got a bunch of cheaper ones that are going to earn Unearth later in the game with all our extra mana. We really only have 2 cards that actually trigger that, so kind of weird that we don't really want that at all. We could take an Aeronaut's Wings that makes all of our small little artifacts like Combat Couriers still impactful later in the game, or maybe 1/1 soldier tokens from Scrapwork Cohort, plus makes the Boulder Branch get into the sky for a ton of damage late. So that could be fine. I don't think we're splashing in Unleash Shell because it is double red. Only really want to splash in cards that require 1 off color of mana, so that I don't have to spend like 4 mana into Energy Refractor just to get double red. So yeah, Aeronaut's Wings here, or just Gaia's Gift for a very solid combat trick. It's a good combat trick because it's useful in basically any position you would ever want a combat trick. It'll save your creature from dying in combat, it'll save your creature from dying to removal, it'll trample over your opponent's blocker to get extra damage in, it'll give you reach to block a flyer if you need to. They just stacked up all the keywords onto this thing so that it's always useful, and I do think it's pretty good. So Wings or Gift, probably. I'm actually going to go with the Wings here. I like the idea of juicing up some creatures rather than just protecting 1 card with a 1-of combat trick. Pick 6, there's nothing super synergistic with our deck here, so we just take the best card in terms of raw power, which is probably Zephyr Sentinel. Blue is one of our main colors, so we should have that on turn 2, and then we just play a 2/1 flyer at instant speed. Can also protect one of our creatures from removal, letting us put it back into our hand to recast it later, or it can work well with great Enter the Battlefield effects, which is actually viable in this deck as well, seeing as we have 2 copies of Philology Archaeologist, which are doing basically nothing but their Enter the Battlefield effect. We have a Blanchwood Prowler as well, and a really big Enter the Battlefield effect from the Skyfisher Spider if we manage to get super lucky and pick that up with Zephyr Sentinel, so I think the card looks pretty great. Pack 3, pick 7, we can now take another Archaeologist or another Stalwart, which are both solid. Maybe Gix's Caress for some hand disruption since we do have the fixing to get there. I'm going to get the Stalwart and get that mana super consistent. Pick 8, I don't think I'll be playing any of this, but Powerstone Fracture can be perfectly reasonable removal. And that is still probably what we are the lowest on, just interacting with our opponents, threats and plays and all that. Pick 9, I don't think I'll be playing any of these, but we're drawing a second card in our turn a lot, so Trench Stalker, just a 5-mana 4/5 Death Touch Lifelinker could be okay. Off of the splash, we do get the Gaia's Gift back anyway, or we get one Gaia's Gift. Maybe this isn't the exact one we passed, but either way, we've got that option. Pick 11, Archaeologist and Gnawing Vermin for self-mill with all the Unearth seem solid. I'm going to take the Archaeologist since it's easier to cast, as I'm going to run probably almost all islands and forests, and just use all the Stalwarts and Refractors for black mana. Pick 12, okay, pretty late Disfigure, we could actually play that. Now there's a Shoot Down, which is interaction, it's pretty narrow and probably going to get cut, because we did get a good chunk of other removal spells to have as solid options here in the end. Wow, pick 15 Archaeologist? All Archaeologists and Unearth spells all day? Could be a fun one here. Could be a very fun one. We've got other combos that are pretty good with that Archaeologist as well. Like, if I mill into a creature in an Emergency Weld, the Archaeologist will put the Emergency Weld into my hand and the creature into the grave, and then the Emergency Weld will just pick up the creature anyway. Yeah, this looks like it's gonna be a fun one, but it's also gonna be quite the process to build. So 18 cuts to go. We probably focus up on blue-green and splash in mainly artifacts with off-color abilities. Really like the idea of going for the Archaeologist value train, so trying to keep that non-creature count high so this draws us a card and like mills an Unearth card every time. Could be really, really excellent value. So let's see about dropping. Mine Workers is pretty mediocre. Shoot Down. Maybe Trench Stalker, Gigamole, because they are off-color spells. Probably Sibling Rivalry, not a lot of ways to sacrifice opposing cards, but we might keep Excavation Explosion to keep the interaction count high. Moment to Defiance, an off-color combat trick, probably not, but maybe Emergency Weld, because it synergizes well with the Archaeologists, and the Powerstone Fracture and Disfigure for more interaction potentially. So I think we can cut this whole pile and see where that leaves us. That still needs 11 cuts to go. Creature to non-creature count, we probably want to be a little higher on non-creatures than normal. The general average is 15 to 17 creatures, and we're currently at 20, so I think we want to cut at least like 5 more creatures still, which is kind of difficult to do because I think most of what's left is pretty good. Could cut the Third Path Savant and the Burrowing Razor Maw. This is more self-mill synergy, but I've already got 4 Archaeologists and Blanchwood Prowler for that. Don't think that's necessary. So we can drop those 2 at least, just like for sure. And then this is still a lot of 2 drops and a lot of 1 drops. You know, it's probably risky to cut the Stalwarts, but if you think about it this way, it's almost like we have 7 copies of Energy Refractor in this deck. If we run 4 Archaeologists, because every Archaeologist digs closer to the Refractors. So, like, we can dig far for those, for fixing if we just use that. And again, I could cut all the mountains. Yeah, that's still 4 pieces of fixing that give us whatever color we need. We could also drop down a little more on the splashes, but yeah, I don't think we need to run any mountains for 1 copy of Excavation Explosion and then Unearth effects. We do maybe need to run some swamps if we run Weld, Fracture, Disfigure, that kind of stuff. Probably a bad idea. It's probably better to cut maybe even Blanchwood Prowler. I don't have that much top end, it's really just the Boulder Branches, and we can just clutter things up until then with all these cheap spells. Rather than ramping into the Boulder Branches, or drawing additional lands into the Boulder Branches. I do really like Thopter Mechanic and Zephyr Sentinel here. Don't think I'm ever cutting those. Oh boy, yeah, still 9 cuts to go, and even if I cut these, then there's still 6 to cut after that. Scrapwork Rage is probably the most mediocre of the Unearth cards we have here, so getting the count down a little more, we could cut that, but then 3, 4, 5, it's only 5 Unearth cards to go with Archaeologist. And it's still 6, because we've got the Research Desk as well. Plus we've got the Emergency Well for Graveyard Recursion, which can be fun. 18 creatures, cut 4 here, go to 14. I don't know, I think that's probably pretty reasonable going to 14 creatures. Running all this. 5 cuts to go. Maybe combat trick kind of thing. Doesn't feel like what this deck's doing. Might not even need the equipment. We just try to outvalue our opponent and play a lot more spells than them rather than protect the few ones that we have cast with a combat trick. Yeah, I'll cut the gift, cut the wings. Still 3 cards to go. Probably epic confrontation, not a ton of beefy creatures to fight with. 2 cards to go. We've still got Skyfisher Spider, Explosion, Powerstone, Fracture, Disfigure. Could cut Explosion, that makes it really easy to run no mountains. And then we actually can, you know, play a couple swamps in addition to the flasks and refractors. And then these are all of the white sources for Cohort, all of the red sources for Mutt and Desk. And that's probably fine. And then what? One more cut? Maybe cut 1 Archaeologist. Yeah, I'll cut 1 Archaeologist. This looks pretty good to me. Actually deeper into black than green at this point, when we don't play the Stalwarts of the Prowler. Being deeper into black than green means we could up the mana curve, go for a Gigamole here. It's pretty solid value. I think that's better than Scrapwork Rager for this kind of deck. Then I can up the mana curve, play a Gigamole over an Archaeologist, and still have all those graveyard recursion synergies and everything. It's an option to think about. But I guess I already have like 4 mana spells and creatures in general, because all 4 of these spells are potentially creatures. That Construct token's probably going to be relatively beefy in this deck with all these non-creature artifacts laying around. Yep, I don't know, probably not the best build of this, but pretty close, and it's a very fun-looking deck. I'm just going to wrap it up and call it a deck here. Alright, here's a look at the final deck list for today, which is going to be a blue-based, Archaeologist-based 4/5 color pile. We're going to be playing a lot of artifact creatures with great Unearth abilities, like Combat Couriers, Scrapwork Mutts, Scrapwork Cohorts, all those kind of cards, as well as Mishra's Research Desk for another spell as well. So tons of great value there, and plenty of artifacts that can splash into those off-color abilities. 3 energy refractors and an Elsewhere Flask. We've got great synergies with the Archaeologists, because we could be milling into any of these Unearthed cards, and this can draw into the energy refractors or any of our powerful non-creature spells. And we've got some other really solid synergies, like Thopter Mechanic with a ton of card draw in this deck to get super beefy, Zephyr Sentinel with a good chunk of powerful enter the battlefield effects, Skyfisher Spider with the Emergency Weld to pick it back up from the grave and recast it as more removal. Just a lot of cute little synergies going on with this deck, and it should be a fun little, 3/4 color pile. So without further ado, let's just head into the gameplay and see how it does. Alright, here we are for game 1 on the play with all 3 of our core colors. The only way to get other colors of mana for Unearth effects and such are our mana-fixing artifacts. This is as good of an opening hand as we can get mana-wise. Although I guess technically Energy Refractor does make it a little better, so let's draw into that. Trade here is perfectly fine. It's just equal value for each player. We both miss out on one piece of card draw. And I'll drop the Energy Refractor. Turn 2 from our opponent, they've got a Scrapwork Mutt. They can discard a card, draw a card with that. And then they can unearth it for 1 and a red. Do the same. They are not going to discard a card here. What shall I do here for 3 mana? Probably just unearth a Combat Courier and draw into something. Oop. Find a Scrapwork Cohort, which is a beautiful draw. That's going to hold the Scrapwork Mutt off, where we can block it with just a 1/1 token and kill it. Or it gives us the 1/1 token we need for Skyfisher Spider to sacrifice something that just doesn't matter. So there's Atomical Scrapsmith from our opponent. They're going to mill 3, find all lands, so they get the +1/+1 counter. And that's it. It's just a 3/2 now. No other text. So here's the Cohort, which is phenomenal here. Perfectly happy to trade the Cohort off aggressively at any point because of its unearth ability. So if they do attack in with Scrapsmith, I'm going to snap block. No attacks here. Don't think I'm cashing in Skyfisher Spider this early, so let's drop an Elspire Flask and see where that gets us, then drop a Courier. Holding up the mana to sack it if I need to. Well, there we go. There's our finisher. We found the Boulder Branch. Think I hold up the 2 for the Courier, although I could spend 1 and get that 1 mana investment out of the way for the research desk. Think I'd rather be flexible and make sure nothing crazy can happen to our Combat Courier. They, like, give our whole board -1/-1 somehow. I don't know, I don't remember the format tremendously well in terms of, like, really narrow, like, instance that you don't see too often, so... Probably playing around ghosts. Scaring myself about cards that don't even exist. Alright, solid Mightstone's animation value for our opponent. Now their Powerstone is a 4/4 beat stick, and they drew a card when they cast the animation. Well, this is a perfectly solid trade to me. I think I have plenty of card draw value, although this token is just objectively weaker than the Combat Courier. I was gonna say I could block with a Combat Courier so I can unearth it later, but it's much more likely that whatever I don't block with here is going to get sacked to a Skyfisher Spider later. In which case it's kind of like the same thing either way. Okay, so I still need 1 more mana to get to Boulder Branch for 7, and we're not going to Skyfisher Spider anything. We're not going to Zephyr Sentinel anything, so let's research desk. See if we find anything interesting. We do find an Archaeologist. I'm a little scared about our deck self-milling. Because we're so good at drawing cards and milling ourselves and all that. Alright, find a Disfigure. That's not bad. Yeah, not a bad turn at all. Don't really need to Disfigure anything yet, but it's good to have the Disfigure. And the Archaeologist is a perfectly solid card to just sacrifice to the Spider. I'm about to gain 6 life. I can just take 3 here, rather than cashing in anything on this pretty mediocre creature. Juggernaut. 5/3 trample. They can unearth 1 time. That might prompt a Skyfisher Spider out of me. Or a Powerstone Fracture, really either. I think I'd rather Skyfisher Spider first, in case we draw into an emergency weld, plus this impacts the board, which is pretty big. Pretty nice. And actually I have the Zephyr Sentinel Skyfisher Spider combo too. So actually because I have that combo, we're definitely playing Skyfisher Spider first, and then just holding up the instant speed mana to pick up that spider. send in the Scrapsmith. I could block and then pick this up, but then if they have instant speed removal to kill it, they stop me from picking it up, which would be bad, so I'm just going to take it again. Go to 12. Alright, they're holding all their mana up. Little scared of Unleash Shell then, double red and 3. To where if I try to Zephyr Sentinel the spider, they Unleash Shell it in response, and I am out of luck there. We can definitely afford to play really slowly here. As long as I'm holding up 2 mana at all times, I should be fine. So I can afford to spend 4, so I can unearth the cohort and still hold up Sentinel. Although it'd be better to just spend 3 right now. Just go like... You know, let me see if they do any combat tricks if I send the spider in here. Because the archaeologist can still block the mutt, and neither of these can block the Scrapsmith without dying. See if I can get them to cast anything, and then we can sentinel in response. Then we'll decide what we're going to do main phase 2. Alright, I think I'm just going to cast Combat Courier, because we are getting to the point where I might have to just disfigure the Scrapsmith. So by casting Combat Courier, I still have the mana up for Sentinel plus Disfigure. And then I'll still have a recast of Skyfisher Spider left, and I'll have Powerstone Fracture left over as well. Okay. Let's go ahead, soak up some damage here and disfigure a Scrapsmith. Go to 10. Now I've got a Skyfisher Spider backup for later. Still did not find the land for Boulder Branch, but Urza's command gives me the Power Stone for it, so I need 4 mana up to do that. I have 2 mana to play with. I have nothing to play for 2 mana, so we just send in and hold up Urza's command to guarantee the Power Stones at the ready for the 7 mana Boulder Branch. One shot Unearths, sure. Honestly, just gonna play it safe and -2, -0 because we have so much card advantage in this deck. That rather than getting a creature off this or drawing a card, I'm just gonna stop 3 points of damage. Really make sure I don't randomly explode before I cast my Boulder Branch Golem. We definitely want to consider that once I do cast Boulder Branch, they could have cards like Sibling Rivalry to steal it and try to hit me for 6. So I do want to like Unearth Cohort before we do anything crazy, so I have at least a 1/1 chump blocker sitting there. So let's spend this turn unearthing the cohort now that I don't have to hold up any instants. Yep, that looks good to me. Got a chump blocker right there. 16 cards left in the deck. I could get a courier swing in and draw a card, or I could just play a mutt. I think I'm just gonna play a mutt. Have another blocker sitting here. Poke for 5. They're down to 9. Now we've got some defenses set up against a potential sibling rivalry. Third Path Iconoclast. We need to kill that instantly. Double Third Path, and then probably 2 or 3 non-creature spells. so that we can't stop them from popping off. No non-creature spells yet. So they must be holding on to a counter spell, and they're going to try to counter Skyfisher Spider. They can't counter the Spider and the Fracture. I would rather they counter the Fracture, so we cast the Fracture first. Then they have to cast the counterspell now if they want to get 2 1/1s, which means that they don't get to counter the Skyfisher Spider. Or they have to let this resolve and then counter the Spider and only get 1 1/1. Oh, there is no counterspell, it's a Stern Lesson. Okay. Cool, very happy with that then. Here's the Skyfisher Spider. A little bold because I do have a 7-drop in hand, but I think... Oh, never mind, this only sacks creatures. Never mind. I was going to say, I think I'd rather sack the Powerstone than my 1/1 here, but I don't have that option with Skyfisher Spider. I always forget that every time I play this format, that Powerstone Fracture and Skyfisher Spider are different. The Spider can only sacrifice creatures. Another Stern Lesson. They're digging for probably just an answer to the Zephyr Sentinel. Find a Latinam Adept. That is certainly not an answer. We're going to be hitting them down to 5 now. There is my 7th mana without the Powerstone, which I don't think really matters because I'm not playing anything except the Boulder Branch this turn. Oop, up to 16, pass turn. 16 life to 5 now. Still plenty of action, plenty of card draw. Excuse me. Steel Exemplar for a 6/6 on the ground. It's got trample as well. But I'm at 16 life with plenty of blockers. There's the Curate to trigger the Latinam Adept. They're getting close to milling out too. They're down to 7 cards out there. Yeah, maybe I didn't need to stop doing all the card draw. Alright. There's the Excavation Explosion. And now we are going to have to start digging again. Just make sure we don't go below 7 cards, I think. So let's Archaeologist first. Land, land, land. Well, there's a 1/4 Archaeologist then. Research Desk. And we can cast this by the end of our next turn, so even if it's expensive, we exile it here. Down to 8 cards? Shoot. Really quickly put myself in a position where I'm milling out first now. Yeah. If I cast this, I'm milling first. If I don't, I'm not. What's left? What 8 cards are left in my deck at this point? Another Boulder Branch, an Emergency Weld is the win condition here. I guess I have to just play it slow and turtle up. Probably. Try to have them mill out. Give me an Avenger. Wow, yeah, they're drawing all the beef now. Not ideal. But I'm still at 16, they're down to 6 cards. Send in the 6/5, trade the Boulder Branch here. And stop all the damage with Archaeologist. Well, I cannot cast that. They have 6 cards? I guess I can cast just that. They'll still mill out first. Even if I draw 1 card here. Dang, there's only 1 card I really want to draw, which is Emergency Weld, but Boulder Branch is a good draw too, so 1/3 of the cards are great draws. Emergency Weld and Boulder Branch is what we're looking for. Maybe I should have taken one of the random, like, keepers that lets you put a card from your grave back on bottom of your library. We could have been just on the just mill your entire deck and then loop it game plan. I was not expecting to end up with this much card draw and self-mill by the end of the draft. Yep, our Givian Avenger gets to get in. Platinum Adept on the ground. It's a Mishra. There's the emergency weld. We are welding the Sentinel, I'm fairly confident. Weld the Zephyr Sentinel. Cast the Sentinel on the Skyfisher Spider. Kill the Argivian Avenger, because that's their only potential flyer to jump over. And we are the Turtle Squad. Four cards left for our opponent. They're going to draw two cards left for our opponent. Trigger both the Adepts is the game plan. Yeah, I guess they do get 3 swings here. Oh, this is going to be close. This has Unearth for damage. This can block here without dying and kill that creature. This can block here without dying and kill that creature. This is 6 damage on board, and then I can try to crack back for lethal by keeping everything out. That feels like a strategy. Try and crack back for lethal at this point. Down to 6. They've only got 4 mana up. Play a combat courier to block Spider. This is lethal on board. They block there and take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. God, I hope they don't have a great instant. And it's just the combat courier holding up the mana here. I do get to cast a Boulder Branch as a 3/3 post-combat if they somehow survive this. But I don't think that's going to be enough to survive a crackback after that. I think we got to just go for it. Come on. Zephyr Sentinel, does that save them? Block, block, take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's exactly 5. Looks like it's still Xaxes. And it wouldn't have been if I didn't unearth these couriers as well, so I'm pretty happy with that choice. I could have instead just unearthed Mutt. That'd still be lethal on board, and then we could Boulder Branch for 7 to gain 6. But yeah, that made it lethal even if they had 1 instant speed removal spell or 1 instant speed creature. Wild game there. Wild game. I felt really good basically the entire time until those last 3 or 4 turns. Because we just had so much action, so many options throughout the game. I think definitely a game that long with that many decisions of what to do every turn could have gone dramatically differently. I'm sure there were plenty lines that could have been tighter. Probably should have just kept going for even more card advantage early, seeing as our opponent got to a low library before we did. And if we just kept the pressure on by just ripping a bunch of cards out of our deck, we probably would have ended up in a better position. Less likely for our opponent to steal it back from us. But overall, really great showing from the deck, even if I don't think I played it out perfectly. The deck itself certainly functioned as we imagined it would. And a solid 1-0 start. Here's a Scrapwork Mutt turn 2 from our opponents. We've got the Refractor to disfigure it if we need to. Which I will if I just draw into a bunch of lands and don't hit any blockers. Argothian Opportunist. Alright, I would rather disfigure an Opportunist. That hits me harder and it doesn't unearth. So it is going to be Time to disfigure an opportunist. If I cast this elsewhere flask... Oh wait, never mind. I have the swamp. Never mind. I was gonna say, if I cast this elsewhere flask, I get the card draw out of the way, but then I'll have to sack it to disfigure. I think I'm gonna disfigure right now in case they have Gaia's Gift to give that hexproof trample. So I need to stop damage immediately. Anyways, if I didn't have a swamp in hand, there was still an argument for casting Elsewhere Flask, even if I would have to sack it to cast the Disfigure. Just to get the card draw out of the way. But then I'd have to animate the Refractor, and I don't want to lose the Refractor. Now I can animate the Flask, which will be the play this turn, I think, over Urza's command. And hold that up as a blocker, because our deck has pretty phenomenal late game. Although theirs likely does as well, being a blue-green mirror match. And there's a Sentinel Stalwart, so all kinds of Unearth splashing as well, as we can see from the Scrapwork Mutt. Alright, our 4/4 Elsewhere Flask does its job. Holds off all the damage here. Can drop a Combat Courier, still have all the mana up for Urza's command. That's probably the play. Urza's command for a big construct token, scry one and draw a card at this point of the game. Sky Fisher Spider. I can't do anything about that. I can pick up my Elsewhere Flask, I guess, to recast it and draw another card. Don't hate that Zephyr Sentinel use. I'm sure there'll be a better use later, and we can just still Urza's command for mana efficiency this turn. Alright, we want the construct, scry one, draw a card. Find a Scrapwork Mutt? Sure, I've got enough mana to discard a land here. Find another Energy Refractor. Alright, Mutt, let's get a land out of here. Find a Thopter Mechanic, that's pretty great. That kind of makes me want to hold on to my Energy Refractor for now. I could make my construct a 5/5 if I play it immediately, but if I play it next turn, I also buff the Thopter Mechanic, so I'm going to hold for that. Because I've already drawn my second card this turn, so drawing a third card won't trigger the +1/+1 counter. And I don't love spending removal on Skyfisher Spider, since one of the strongest things you can do with it is recur it from the grave and cast it again, because black has pretty good graveyard recursion in the set with Emergency Weld. So that's why I'm not going for just Powerstone Fracture Attack all. I would rather save this for something that's just exclusively a threat, rather than something that has a good enter the battlefield effect they might be able to abuse again. Well, I'm glad this destroys Planeswalkers. I ain't reading all that.
I'm finished running from battles I might not win.
When you see your opponent cast a Planeswalker, don't read the Planeswalker, read your removal spell, and see if it destroys Planeswalkers. That's the general game plan. Alright, pretty great value for our opponent, because they do 2-for-1 they 2-for-1 us here, where even though I spend the removal on it and kill it immediately, they still have a spirit sitting here and getting bigger. So that's rough for us. Still definitely our best play here. So let's play a second Refractor, because we only need one on the board, and sack the second copy, I think. Could wait till post-combat, then I'm attacking with a 5/5 instead of a 4/4. And they have to block with a 3/3 and a 2/2. I guess they could go 3/3/2/3, and that would suck. is if I play another energy refractor, I make it a 6/6 on attacks, and they probably don't block. But then I don't have the card draw for Thopter Mechanic next turn. I guess I have the Combat Courier, but then this gets smaller when I sack the Courier, and a lot to consider here. I do think I want to go big on damage here. I'm going to go for the Refractor. Alright, cool. Guess since I'm not buffing Mechanic next turn anyway, I wouldn't mind trading it off, getting a 1/1 flyer and buffing the Construct. Although it plays bad against 1/1 removal. Yeah, I'll still hold on to that. Alright, 6 damage to face. And now we fracture Teferi.
Truth still eludes me.
Energy Refractor. Yeah. Even just leaving the Teferi token behind is such an issue. It's already a 4/4. If they unearth the Scrapwork Mutt, which they absolutely can, it's going to be a 5/5 Vigilance already. Yeah, we might just get absolutely decked by Teferi, even having the removal for him immediately. The Spirit of Teferi coming in hot. Now we got nothing here. No attacks, because they can block with a 3/3 and a 2/3 and a 1/1, or a 4/4 and a 2/2. Yeah, this is kind of a bummer. We need to find interaction for the Spirit, or it is going to take over the game, even without its big boss. Because they've got mana for the Savant now to draw to as well. Like, I guess if we find a way to clear out the Skyfisher Spider, we can try to outrace them in the sky with Zephyr Sentinel. But if I find removal, I'm pretty sure it's going at the Spirit. Probably at the point now I need to cash this in. Come on. Give me the goodies. That's not actually very good right now. We don't have any Boulder Branches or Skyfisher Spiders, which is where it becomes very good. There's really nothing to pick up with that, unless I just pick up the Courier. I guess I keep digging. Make our blocker as big as it can be and have the chumper down that chumps and draws a card. Energy Refractor. Draw a card. Buff the Spirit. Well, buff our Thopter Mechanic and see where we go. Absolutely nowhere. We're just gonna cash in again. There's an archaeologist. That's a big one. Although I'm getting pretty close to milling myself. How does that happen? Creature, creature, creature. R.I.P. At least two of them were Unearth cards. Yep. Third Path Savant starts popping off with the spirit. Our Boulder Branch Golem finisher is looking absolutely tiny now. Yeah, I have to chump that, otherwise they draw cards at instant speed and I die. I take 15 damage if I let that in. Like, I can block and pick it up with Zephyr Sentinel, but I think the only way I'm getting back is if I get a really good Enter the Battlefield effect doubled up with Sentinel. If I hit the Skyfisher Spider, basically. Like, if I end up just playing this to pick up a mutt to re-block with it again, I just have the one Skyfisher. Don't think it'll be enough. So I have already spent the one emergency weld to dig farther. Well, their archaeologist was significantly better here. That's multiple great options. They pick the desynchronize, which they have at instant speed. We find another archaeologist. These clumping up at the bottom of the deck is pretty bad, but we'll see where we get. Probably mill both my boulder branches based on how things are going. Yep, literally the top two cards of my deck. At this point, we know exactly what 6 cards are left. The Scrapwork Cohort, 1 Skyfisher Spider, a land, and a Research Desk. There is no combination of draws that wins us the game now, and we're going to move on to game number 3. Gonna make some slight adjustments to the deck, though, real quick, before we head to game 3. Just adjustments based on the fact that we did not end up drafting a card that saves us from self-mill, because we have gotten basically to the point of milling ourselves in both games. So I think we want to add just a little more finishers, like a Trench Stalker to top off and end the game, and cut a little bit of self-mill. So I'm going to drop an Archaeologist here for a Trench Stalker. Minor little adjustment, but that should be helpful. Aeronaut's Wings as well looked like it would have been great in any of these games. So I will run an Aeronaut's Wings here over one thing, maybe an Elsewhere Flask or maybe a Combat Courier. But now that I have Aeronaut's Wings, that's another thing to dig for with the Archaeologist, so I don't want to cut down to one copy of that here. So let's go drop the Elsewhere Flask. I think we've been doing great off of the Refractors alone. So we will swap those out real quick and call it a deck there. Alright, here we are for game number 3 with a perfectly keepable opener. Blue really is the most important color in this deck by a lot, and the Energy Refractor does get all the off colors. Mono black so far from our opponent. Let's go Archaeologist here, I think. Get some stuff on the board while we're drawing cards. Mill 3 lands, well, still get a 1/4 down then. Black-red sacrifice it is from our opponent with the Transmigrant Altar to be able to sacrifice some stuff. Send in, drop Energy Refractor, or hold the Zephyr Sentinel. Let's get some damage in here. Go for Zephyr Sentinel damage, picking up Archaeologist for potential card draw. Seems fine. Although, I think I'm just going to keep the Sentinel. Keep the Archaeologist on the board. So I've got a 1/4 to block the 3/1. But I am going to start jamming it in the sky with this Sentinel. Alright, so they can turn their 1/1 into a 3/3 for 2 mana. Yep. And they pass turn. Let's scry and draw. Well, you know, Powerstone token's probably just worth a card at this point with a 7-drop in hand. So we'll go Powerstone in the construct, and that also means the construct's bigger. It's the 6th mana towards artifacts. We're only 1 mana away from Boulder Branch. See what Energy Refractor finds us, and also buff up the construct so it kills both their creatures. Guess we just keep buffing the construct. Here's another Energy Refractor. Finding the 7th mana to play Boulder Branch Golem next turn, and here's Combat Courier. So I'm attacking with a 6/6, and they have to double block, trade both creatures here. Okay, disfigure the flyer. They are not gonna go for the trade, which I am a little surprised by, but we'll take it. Put them down to 9. There's another Scrapwork cohort, so now they can try to double block with 2 cohorts to kill it. Or, I see, they have the removal in hand, which is why they don't go for the trade. Alright, well, we're still holding everything off with just the Archaeologist, and here's my big Boulder Branch Golem threat to top off the curve. And that trades into 2 of their creatures yet again. If they don't find a white source to unearth these cohorts, I think we're in a pretty good position. If they do, then they're in a pretty good position, because then they can unearth the cohorts and sack them to the altar, and then sack the 1/1s to the altar, and just go crazy from there. I have no idea what trick this is going to be, but because the Courier's unearthed, I really don't mind losing them to a trick, so we'll triple block here and see what it is. Alright, I still got my 2 pieces of card draw here. It's Excavation Explosion they wanted to use to kill the Golem. This is creature only. Yeah, they can't sack the Powerstone to that. They can sack a cohort, make it a 3/3. Okay, that makes it so I don't get to poke them with any of the unearthed couriers, so that makes a little bit of sense. Let's see what a research desk finds us before I do anything. Finds another Boulder Branch. I mean, that's the pick. We can't play it right now. Gotta wait till next turn. But that's certainly the play. Trade into their whole board. Yep. And we're in a position where basically they need to find a wipe source or they're pretty dead, I think. Pendragon Strongbow. Decent card, but we are at 26, so that damage that thing's going to be dealing to us is not going to get there. And there's the concession from our opponent. We are now 2-1, heading into game number 4. Alright, here we are for game 4 with our opponent on the play. We've got a pretty good hand in terms of defensive speed, having a Disfigure immediately and a Thopter mechanic to trade off. So I do enjoy that. I'm actually just going to hold the Disfigure in case they've got a really good 2-drop. Might be wrong, but we'll see. Blanchwood Prowler is not a really good 2-drop for Disfigure. Figure I'm not going to want to crack the research desk for a while anyway. Okay, find a Combat Courier. Here's Thopter mechanic. Next turn, probably spend all 3 on playing the Courier and drawing the card off of it to buff the mechanic. Send in the Prowler, no blocks. What did they mill? Gruesome Realization, Epic Confrontation. That's decent. Alright, they could have a Disfigure here. They've got an instant for 3 or less. That's a little annoying. Probably still supposed to sack Courier for 1 extra point of damage. If they don't have exactly Disfigure. And if they do, either way, Courier is still giving us a full card worth of value when we sack it. I don't know, I guess I can hit for 1 less point of damage and hold the Disfigure up and play around the removal, and also hold Courier up. I probably should have played Research Desk, because it's less important to hold up Courier's mana, because we are unlikely to sack it during their turn. Yeah, playing a little loose here. We probably should have dropped Research Desk and just held up Disfigure. So we're losing out on some mana, which definitely adds up in the long run, but our opponent just lost 3 mana last turn. Did absolutely nothing with it. So that helps. And now we've got an Urza's Command to hold up, so I think I'm just doing that. Really lucky draw to hit the second blue source this turn right on time, because we could have gotten really punished for being mana inefficient otherwise. Not having the Research Desk just on the board ready to go, instead of having to spend 2 mana on it right now. But since we just naturally hit the second blue for Urza's Command, we don't have to worry about any of that. We can just cast an Urza's Command. 5 mana, there's a Skyfisher Spider, so they can sacrifice the Blanchwood Prowler to kill the Thopter mechanic, but then we get a 1/1 flyer out of it anyway, so... not the worst at all. Yeah, this is fine. Now our construct's actually going to be very beefy. I think we do take the Powerstone here. Yeah, I'm going to go for the Powerstone and the construct to make this a 4/4, and then a 5/5 when we play the desk. Plus it gives me mana towards any of our 7 drops we draw into, since we aren't there yet. Now I get to cast a Trench Stalker for the turn. Yep. Since it's a 4/4, I get to attack in, also play Trench Stalker. Got a 1 mana green spell, so they have Literal Giant Growth for +3/+3. That would be cute. I can Disfigure, so we still trade, but then I don't play Trench Stalker this turn. I think I'm playing Trench Stalker this turn. Since they're pretty heavy into black, I'm not that excited about killing the Skyfisher Spider because, again, Graveyard Recursion is a thing. But yeah, Urza's Command still does its job there. Trades a full card into a full card of theirs, and leaves this Powerstone behind for value that we've already used at least 1 mana of this turn. Now we can use the mana next turn on the desk's ability. Okay. If I crack the Combat Courier, then Trench Stalker's a Death Touch Lifelinker, and I have Emergency Well before it, so I think we do that. So it can trade into Pallbearer, and then I can just pick it up and have a threat that trades into their biggest threats again next turn. Or they can just take it, and it's a huge life swing in my favor. That works too, because I've got plenty of other stuff to cast here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 7 mana. I think I can discard this forest and draw a card. Find a Combat Courier, which I can cast while still holding up Disfigure. Because I'm not going to Emergency Weld just the 2/1 right now. I'm going to have that for Trench Stalker, I think. With the Courier and Grave Another on board, this Stalker's always going to be Death Touch Lifelink. Classic, the house settling. Spooky sounds. Aww, exile removal. I cry every time. $22? I think I take this instead of trading like a bunch of spells and disfigure into that. Alright, I guess let's choose what we're going to cast next turn. Well, Skyfisher Spider of our own it is. That's the spell for this turn. And now, if they don't exile this, I've got a Skyfisher Spider for the emergency weld. This is kind of weird. I might sack the flyer. Nah, I should probably do the mutt. Okay, they're going to concede either way. Taking too much time going through all my options. They are very over it, and we are 3-1, heading into game 5. Alright, here we are for game number 5. Our opponent's on the play. Got an early Thopter mechanic. We've got a Trench Stalker turn 5. Hand looks pretty solid, but if our opponent's a really aggressive red deck here, we could get overrun. I mean, we've got a lot of cheap spells, just not any 1-mana plays. Luckily, our opponent doesn't go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, and so on from there. They do miss on their 2-mana play. So that should give us a little bit of breathing room. If I block and they cast any instant, then I lose the mechanic for nothing. Looks like they didn't have an instant though, so maybe I should have blocked. Now I can block, and if they do prowess, then I Zephyr Sentinel the mechanic back to hand. Recast it to trade at a later date. Okay. Alright. This is all looking fine. Turn 1 Monastery Swiftspear was very scary. But then they just played nothing until turn 4, so... do not have to worry about like a crazy curve or anything like that. Alright, let's see if we find something to cast this turn or next turn. We do find an Archaeologist for this turn. That is fine. That can block the Chain Dancer, force them to spend the mana into giving the double strike. That seems good to me. And we milled a Combat Courier, which is perfect for our Trench Stalker coming up. I'll go for the block here. This is pretty expendable. Even with a Powerstone Fracture in hand, I have an Emergency Weld to make something as well. This soaks up 2 of their mana, so they don't get to play a 4-drop or a 5-drop this turn. Third Path Iconoclast. That I ideally would like to kill as quickly as possible before they get 1/1s. I still think I should... cast Trench Stalker first. I guess I can Emergency Weld, Fracture, get a Thopter mechanic back, which is another flyer for later. Yeah, this is fine too. I could really see either way, just slamming down a Trench Stalker or immediately killing the Iconoclast. And we're still racing here because we're potentially going to have a lifelinker down soon. Hold all the mana up, no double strike this turn. That is interesting. Let's see what that mana's up for. Send in before I make any decisions here. But I think I'm slamming down Trench Stalker. Koilos Rock. Alright. That does get me here. I forgot about Koilos Rock in the format. Yeah, we're still just playing Trench Stalker. Terramorphic into a plains. And here's the removal. Ah, shoot, this is not good. We're still quite ahead in card advantage if I can survive. They're down to just one card in hand, so Skyfish or Spider very well could have us survive here. So we play that to kill the flyer. 2/4 double strike. If I put a 3/3 and a 2/1 under that, I can't kill it, and it can kill both my creatures. I might actually have to kill the double striker here and just hope having the reach creature for the flyer is going to be enough. For now, I've got plenty of card draw soon, but I can't afford to spend time on that right now. I think I actually have to kill the double striker and hope they're out of removal. We can just block the rock. Might have been safer to sack. It guaranteed would have been a little safer to sack Mechanic that way if they had like a sibling rivalry to steal the Skyfish or Spider, we'd survive this turn. Oh my god, we actually do it. I've already cast my 1 emergency weld, so we do take all this life gain. And that gives us so much breathing room at 11 life now. Just use combat couriers for now, I think. Use all the energy refractors later. Boom, boom. Yeah, I guess I actually had to use an energy refractor this turn. So keeping a courier for later would have been nice. Because this way I've got the red source for research desk next turn. Although now I've hit a boulder branch, which is fantastic. There's a rock hunter. Yeah, it's just boulder branch time. Let's go. Up to 17. Yeah, we're so stable there. Our opponent does just scoop them up. We are now 4-1 heading into game number 6. Again, some pretty sloppy gameplay, but really getting lifted up and held together by the power level of the deck in general. The deck has been playing out super well. All of the synergies in the deck ideas really coming to fruition for us. Here we are for game 5. This is pretty close to a mulligan, with one uncastable card in the hand and just a 2-drop and a 4-drop, but I'm still going to keep it here. I think Sentinel into Cohort's a pretty good start to the game. Hopefully good enough. Although Sentinel's quite bad against the Gnawing Vermin. So I might not end up casting that if I can avoid it. Because when the Gnawing Vermin dies, they give something -1/-1. There's plenty of ways to sacrifice it in black. Especially in black-red, which it looks like they may be. And they find their red source for next turn off of the research desk. Bitter Reunion is the play. That's not another creature, but it does mean when they do play more creatures, they can sack that and give them all haste, which is a very threatening effect. Oof, discard a Juggernaut as well for maximum value. Discard an Unearther. Game is not looking like a great start for us. Might just get overwhelmed here, because again, I'm not going to play Sentinel into a black-red sack deck that has a Vermin on board. Archaeologist is a fantastic draw. I'll take absolutely anything that I can play turn 3 to actually get a blocker on board against this color pair. And that works. Picks up the energy refractor as well for later, which means that we have the Skyfisher, Spider, mana. Not on curve, but later in the game. We're definitely playing Cohort next turn. Scrapwork Rager for a 2/2 that draws a card. Alright, nice slow curve from the Rakdos deck. I like this. We've still got time to dirtle around. That is certainly what I love doing in this format. Very dirtly player in this format. I have played my fair share of Rakdos aggro and Azorius soldiers in this set, black, red, and white, blue. Those are the really aggressive decks. But I feel like the longer the set's been out, the more it comes back for quick drafts, the more I just do these 3+ color dirtle fests with a bunch of artifacts in them. Battlefield Butcher, that can be pretty good in a board stall, just constantly making us lose some life. Let's get the Refractor down so that I've got access to my Skyfisher Spider soon. And we'll see what we draw off of it. Find an island. So I can cast Zephyr Sentinel plus Disfigure. I could Powerstone Fracture the Butcher if I'm that scared of it. I think I'm just going to Skyfisher Spider something next turn anyway, so I'm just going to hold up the mana for Zephyr Sentinel and Disfigure. And if I can Zephyr Sentinel up my Scrapwork cohort, that will be a soldier, and the Sentinel will be a 3/2 flyer, which is out of reach of the -1/-1 of the Gnawing Vermin. So that might be worth it. This could be interesting. If I do like this, then I might get them to target cohort with the -1/-1, and then I just pick it up. Oh, heck yeah. And they could respond to this by using removal on cohort, but if they do that, then they're losing all of the Gnawing Vermin value anyway, and just spending a full-on removal spell on cohort. Alright. Looks pretty good for us. There's a Juggernaut. So that I'm definitely going to want to kill. Play a Powerstone Fracture and a cohort, or I can Skyfisher Spider. I don't really want to lose my O3 right now, since it is stopping 2 damage a turn from the Scrapwork Rager. I think I'm gonna sack a Combat Courier to Skyfisher Spider here. Because I have to sack a creature. So this is the only way I keep the O3, but play the Skyfisher Spider this turn. I guess the consideration is that since the Skyfisher Spider is a 3/3, it blocks the Rager from ever attacking it again anyway also. But, I don't know, I've got another Energy Refractor for card draw, and I still have 3 other spells in hand. I don't think I need that much card draw to need the Courier draw from the grave. Got a bunch of graveyard synergies now. Thran Vigil, when their cards leave their grave, they put a +1/+1 counter on the board. And Dredge and Claw, when something comes back from the grave, the Claw equips. So when they're unearthing these things, mainly the creatures, they're going to be super beefy. Okay. We've got Disfigure as a combat trick if they go for the double block here. We can kill both their creatures, or kill the Rager and not lose the Spider. I guess, yeah, if they double block, I'm not really accomplishing anything with Spider. I'm just playing a Disfigure on a Rager, basically. And these are bouncing off each other, so I don't think there's a point. Overwhelming remorse, RIP. Sad day for the Zephyr Sentinel. Okay, I mean, they have a bunch of damage sitting in their grave lying in wait. I think our board state's very slowly getting there. We're out of threats to play, though. Yeah, they are very much catching up. 2 Scrapwork Ragers and a Mishra's Research Desk, as well as another desk and grave. So they've got tons of card draw still waiting. Emergency Weld Skyfisher Spider seems legit. If we do get this to trade off. Kind of have to Fracture the Butcher to do much here. Luckily I've got an Energy Refractor that's sitting here not doing anything anyway. The second Energy Refractor is just completely redundant, since the first one gives you all the abilities you need. You can use it any number of times per turn. Double block, I could let this die so it's ready for Emergency Weld, but I like clearing out their entire board to where all they can do is unearth things that can't block, and we get to just crack back with everybody. But yeah, that means no creatures in the grave, so no Emergency Welding. But if they don't have a creature they can just cast here, they unearth something, hit me for a bunch, but then they have no blockers up. And if they have no blockers up 2 turns in a row, that is dead. So yeah, they're going to have to dig, use the research desk here. Looks like they found 2 really good spells. Oh yeah, Obliterating Bolt, Emergency Weld, those are both incredible. And of course, Obliterating Bolt is exile removal again. Why is the red burn spell going to be exile too against our Emergency Weld? That's really frustrating. And now the Skull Flayer. It's going to be a 3-4, then a 4-5, then a 5-6. Alright. Pretty incredible hit off of the research desk, and the fact that we're running up against nothing but exile removal is really, really destroying us here. I think if you swap either of their removal spells out for just destroy target creature, we would be in a very actively winning position right now, but now we are in a losing spot. Can't break through the Skull Flayer, and they just kill us with some Unearth cards here. If they attack with the Skull Flayer, we do get to break through a little. It's nice. This lets me put Archaeologist in grave to do something if I top deck a land. If I top deck a land, I'm gonna have to just cash in the Weld. But if I top deck anything else, I'm probably going to just cast that and not do anything with Emergency Weld. There's the Aeronaut's Wings we splashed in. That actually does seem decent here. It's 4 mana to use Wings. So I can Weld and play Archaeologist and play and equip Wings still. So if I don't find something better with Archaeologist. Finds a Research Desk. I've got 6 mana. That means I can play and activate Desk and still have 4 to play and equip Wings. Find another Archaeologist. Okay, I would rather play and equip Wings than play that right now. Probably going to have the mana to move this around wherever I need it next turn, so I don't think it's incredibly relevant where I put it, but I will put it on the biggest creature. Because they're pretty unlikely to have any blocks up. They're very unlikely to have flying blocks up next turn. Okay, let's see if we die or not. Like, they've got no cards in hand. They're playing off the top, so I just double block the Skull Flayer. right? They unearth their biggest threat, hit me with it for like 6, but I double block Skull Flare and survive. I probably should have held the soldier back and just poked them to 5 for now. That way, one removal spell doesn't stop me from blocking the menace. Alright, yeah, they have to hit something here. Off this research desk again. It's another Thran visual? Oh, it's a Thraxidemon. Pretty similar artwork. Yeah, just a creature. I don't think that gets them there. I guess the nice part about having attacked with the cohort and the soldier token is that they're dead to just cohort attacking this guy. So now I don't have to have enough creatures to go wide around all their blockers. So there's that. Yep, still digging. Research desk number 2. It has to be something that wins them the game for 3 or less mana. Let's see. Obliterating Bolt is very close. Actually, it might do it, because it's exile removal. If it didn't exile, I would unearth. Oh my god. I swear. Okay, so we're attacking them for 3 on board. I don't think I block. I think I Archaeologist, and if we hit anything with Unearth, they're dead. Right? But if I double block here, they kill the 1/1. Then if I hit a 1/1 with Unearth, it's not lethal anymore, it's 3 damage. This way, if I hit literally anything with Unearth, they die. Alright, Archaeologist, find me anything with Unearth in the top 3. There we go. Combat Courier is game. Exact lethal for 4 damage. Ooh, that was a really sketchy matchup. Almost entirely just because all of their removal exiled. That got us so bad in multiple occasions with the Emergency Weld and the Unearth stuff. So I guess that game really showing off the value of exiling instead of destroying in this format. But we still do manage to get there by the skin of our teeth in the end at what, 5-1 now, I think. Really, really nice win rate for this draft, no matter what happens from here. All right, here we are on the draw for game number 7. Drop our research desk out, get that mana investment out of the way. We're playing against some Phyrexians. Black-white deck from our opponent. Here is the Archaeologist. See if we can find an Energy Refractor. That'd be pretty good here with the cohort and the research desk. We don't find that, but we do find the Aeronaut's Wings, which has been great in the one game we've drawn it in so far. I'm pretty happy with the sideboard choices we've made and mated. Pretty happy with the sideboard choices that we have made of adding an Aeronaut's Wings and a Trench Stalker for just more ways to actually be closing out these games. I think it has been it's been advantageous. Don't want to see what Research Desk finds me? Not exactly, because I know I want to just play Scrapwork Cohort next turn. So I think I'm just cashing in the wings and not using Research Desk right now. Getting the initial 2 mana out of the way. So all we have to do is pay for the equip costs. And even just equipping a 1/4 Archaeologist, or a 1/3 Archaeologist is going to be fine on blocks. Ooh. Well, our opponent is going to go miles off of this Tokaj's Welcome. Black-white is all about creatures with mana value 3 or less in this format. And this card is incredible with Unearth cards as well. Like, you play a Courier, you draw a card, next turn you Unearth it, you draw another card. They are going to be way ahead in card advantage throughout this game. So we got to try to get as much impact as we can throughout the early game as possible. Just jam in for a ton of damage here, because we are not going to outvalue them in the long game with that spell on board turn 3. Yoshin Medic is the play. They draw a card, and more importantly, well, not more importantly, but they also have a 1/4 lifelinker, so I can't get in on the ground with this cohort. I will research desk here. Set up something to play this turn or next. Find Thopter Mechanic. I can play that this turn. Let's do so. Don't think we're fracturing a Yoshin Medic. Not yet. Let's wings up the cohort and hit for 4. Start racing in with that. Recruitment Officer is a real good card. Draws them a card off of Takashi's Welcome. And for 4 mana, if they run out of things to do, they can keep digging through their library for more creatures. There's the Disfigure for the Thopter Mechanic. That gives us another flyer, so not bad. Fine little exchange there. We are going to send in the Ocean Medic to gain 1, but that's all. Gain your 1 life. Alright, so they do have an Ambush Paratrooper in their hand. So they're going to play that during this turn to draw another card off of Takashi's Welcome. And that can also buff their whole board, so we need to save the Fracture for that. We definitely want to kill a Flyer because we have the Aeronaut's Wings. But we'd so much rather kill the Paratrooper than the Chaplain. So I can't research desk, so let's combat Courier. That does declare an attack pretty reasonably on this board. Maybe send in everybody. I don't love Cohort for a 1/1. When we don't have an Energy Refractor yet, so let's just send in these. And then cash in the Courier to draw a card. We've got 3 mana up to play whatever we draw. And this gets them to play the Paratrooper pre-combat, so we can blow it up with Fracture this turn instead of next. Yeah, pretty happy with this. Obviously, I do have to spend 2 tokens to kill it instead of just 1, but I think it's worth it. Because this card's got a really good mana sink. Not a good draw, but we've got our 7 mana play anyway. Our Boulder Branch Golem. Then we just send that in the sky, hopefully. But they've drawn quite a few cards here, so they could definitely dig for removal for Boulder Branch. Ooh, below an Overwhelming Remorse right now, so they don't have it for Boulder Branch. That might be good for us, if they don't have yet another removal spell in hand. Of course, it is exile-based removal again, which is a huge bummer. So no unearthing. Whenever we do find an Energy Refractor. Recommission the Paratrooper, draw another card? Yeah, no. Trying to keep things rolling here, trying to do what we can, but we're really getting Takashi's welcomed. It is absurd. Yeah, and it triggers off tokens too. This figure's too small because they recommissioned the Paratrooper. This all lands over here. I can see what we get off of Research Desk for next turn, because I think I'm spending 2 on Aeronaut's Wings. Trench Stalker next turn it is. Please no removal. Let me poke you for 7. They let me poke them for 7. Okay. The teeniest, tiniest chance here. They have massive counterattacks with that Ambush Paratrooper, though, to give the whole board +1/+1. And they still have a full grip of cards from this welcome. Yeah, another Overwhelming Remorse. Zephyr Sentinel's the draw. 2 for Sentinel, 2 for Wings, or 2 for Sentinel, 1 for Disfigure. Probably 2 for Sentinel, 1 for Disfigure. Jesus. Okay. Guess I don't get to combat trick them with Zephyr Sentinel, but I think I'm supposed to pick this up. I just die in 2 swings anyway, though. I don't have time to recast it and do anything with it. Especially because they have the mana up to give the whole board +1/+1 this turn. So if they're going to give everybody +1/+1, we have to block a 1 toughness creature, because we can still do 2 damage to that. And then I can disfigure the 1/1 flyer, I guess. I guess this is like a 3/4 with a disfigure. It's going to plop down to a 1/2, and they'd trade here. So I could spend Sentinel plus disfigure to kill paratroopers. They don't have the mana sink anymore. They take a lot of damage elsewhere. This is just a nightmare all around. I don't think there's really a good block anywhere. I don't want to kill Cohort because they just unearth it and get another soldier and an even wider board state. Yep, and there's Emergency Well, which draws them another card off Welcome because it triggers on tokens. Alright, well, did what we could, but really that was just Tokaja's Welcome game. What, they drew like 9 cards by the end of that game off that thing? They drew one every single turn, every one of their turns, and in one of ours. Because of the flash from Paratrooper. So yeah, it was like 7 to 9, something like that, cards off of it. Insane card advantage off that rare, and we just get absolutely overrun by that. 5-2 it is, heading into game number 8. Here we are now for game number 8 on the play. Get things rolling with the Combat Courier. Send it in for 1. And drop an Energy Refractor. Aeronaut Wings is like 1 more damage a turn. It doesn't really impact the amount of damage you're doing till later in the game when you need to jump over blockers pretty badly. And yeah, they play a 2-mana creature that can't block, so it's definitely not speeding things up right now. Now let's Research Desk for something that costs 4 or less. Scrapwork Mud it is. That will be the play next turn. We can play that and the Aeronaut's Wings. Could trade Courier into that. Maybe should have, because that is a lot of damage to try to outrace. Yeah, probably should have. I'm feeling extra bold right now with my plans to outrace them. Yeah. Alright, took an extra 3 damage for basically no reason here. We'll block it this time if they do it again, though. Because it takes 6 mana to come back. Yeah. Obstinate Baloth. Okay, we were definitely not outracing them, but this Skyfisher Spider can get rid of that Baloth and keep some damage coming in. Self-Assembler, great card if you can pick up duplicates. That's pretty hard in this format. Wow. Yeah, I was going to say it's really unlikely in this format, actually. I don't think I've ever managed to get double Self-Assembler in Brothers War. Because they're in the bonus sheet, you're just not likely to find multiple copies. Our opponent did it though. See, I could fracture for this turn. And then hit for 5 and then just Aeronaut's Wings next turn when they tap out to play another Self-Assembler. I think I actually ditched the Energy Refractor at this point, even with a Research Desk Engrave, just to keep more damage on the board. More card draw for the Thopter Mechanic. Yeah, because they have to just tap out for a blocker on the ground, most likely. Play the 5-mana 4/4. Nope. Carrion Locust in the Sky exiles the Research Desk, but that doesn't really matter when we've gotten rid of our Energy Refractor. That won't matter for quite a while. Okay, well, I mean, there's no good blocks for the Carrion Locust right now. I guess it trades with Thopter Mechanics so that it doesn't get any bigger. But yeah, we're already good. I'm actually going to Archaeologist pre-combat, see if I draw anything like a Disfigure to just kill the Locust here. Nope, I hit a Scrapwork Cohort for later. Go for the throat. Destroy my 3/3. Sure, you got it. I played or exiled Emergency Weld yet? No, I am going to decline to exile it to gain the life then. They are going to trade for Thopter Mechanic. We're going to get our 1/1 flyer. And let's get a 3/1 flyer as well. Attacking for 4 damage in the sky a turn. Scrapwork Rager, that is on the ground, and it shoots them in the face, so 4 damage 2 turns in a row kills them, and they're just going to concede. We are now 6-2, heading into the final battle with this deck. Got to play as many games as possible. At 9 games total, this will be the final game of Magic for today. Win or lose, this will decide if we are gonna get a trophy run or just come really sadly close. So, see how it all shapes up in the final boss. And here we are now for the final battle. Kind of an awkward hand. Just a 1-drop and then a 7-drop, really, but we can fill the gap, casting some Refractors and hoping to draw into something. Let's just draw like a champion, and that's a good start. Finding a Scrapwork Mutt here. And I can just discard one of these Energy Refractors, because the only thing I'm going to do with the second one is spend 2 mana to draw a card off of it anyway. So let's just get that 2 mana spent immediately, ditch it, and just insta-draw the card. Alright, there's an Archaeologist. This could be bad. If they don't pick something up, then that's a 1/4. If they do pick something up, like Mightstone's Animation, then I can still attack into it. It is still bad for me, though, because that's pretty great valued. Picking up another draw spell. And now we're only dealing 1 damage a turn right now. Well, if I knew it was going to be 3 more lands on top, I would have ditched a land to Scrapwork Mutt, but I think with a 7-drop Boulder Branch in hand, it would be a little greedy to just ditch a land to Scrapwork Mutt. Okay, now I can't attack in at all. And I don't think it's worth playing a 3/3 Boulder Branch. I think we have to wait and make these things 6/5s. Try to close out the game with them. Which could work out for us, but our opponent has a lot of time to establish some big blockers. So if we can find like an Aeronaut's Wings in the meantime, that might be our best bet. Send the Boulder Branches into the sky to end the game. Alright, our opponent finds their black source. And their Urza is just a little draw and discard spell. They get some Power Stones when they do it. Alright, 2/2 flyers, so they're going to start chipping in. Yeah, starting to really wish I ditched Scrapwork Mutt. Just cash in Courier at this point, see if we can find anything viable, since the 1/1's not going to impact the game from here on out. Cohort is something viable. I can play that next turn. Yeah, I'm just going to spend the turn drawing 2. Okay. Well, that's our 6 mana worth of plays for next turn, so I don't mind those draws. Probably should have cashed the Cohort a little earlier, given up on it ever attacking in. Ooh, Thopter Mechanic of their own. Not good for me, especially followed by the second draw for turn. Yep, jamming with Wing Commando, jamming with Urza. We take 4. Alright, here's Cohort, and we've got the 2 mana up for Sentinel. Ooh, incredibly mana efficient use of their turn. That they got to tap out for all their spells, also use Urza's ability, and then discard an Unearther and get a Powerstone off of Urza. It's a really smooth turn for our opponent. There's Hero of the Dunes, one of my favorite cards in the set, an incredible signpost uncommon. 5 mana 3/2 that buffs basically your entire board and reanimates basically anything from your grave. Card is insane. I have drafted and cast a lot of copies of that, and our opponent is splashing it in here, as I would be doing here if we found one in our draft pod. Yeah, we are under a whole ton of life total pressure from that now. Probably have to trade Zephyr Sentinel into the Wing Commando at this point. They've got 1 blue mana up to try to play something for prowess to make their Wing Commando beat my Zephyr Sentinel. So I don't think I need to pick up the Scrapwork Cohort or the Soldier token to make my Sentinel a 3/2. I think just a 2/1 Sentinel should be fine to trade into Wing Commando. Because for 1 mana, all they're realistically going to have here is just Urza's ability, I think. I guess they could have Machine over Matter. That would be disgusting. 1 blue mana, bounce one of my permanents, buff the Commando so it beats Sentinel. I'll give them the game if they have that. We're already far enough behind. We'll probably lose if they don't have that. At least we can lose in, like, spectacular fashion if they do. And this is a better play if they don't have the thingamabob. The Machine over Matter. And again, the reason that we don't know 100% they have Machine over Matter here is because Urza has an instant speed 1 mana ability that Arena could be holding for, and that looks like what it is. Okay. Well, here we go. Start the Boulder Branch train. And hope to be stable from there. We are back to 21, and this 1/6/5 is almost as big as their whole board. Next turn, I have the mana to cast the other Boulder Branch Golem and a Disfigure, which is very nice. Ooh, the Energy Refractor counts as a mana value 3 or less creature for hero as well. Ah, there's the Overwhelming Remorse. I don't feel like we saw any of those in our draft pod. We are just getting demolished by them, though. We've seen so many copies today. I guess this is the only game that I'm losing where a bunch of Overwhelming Remorses have been cast against us. We actually won against all the other ones. Because our other losses were to like a white deck with Tokasia's Welcome, and I don't remember the first loss because that was a very long time ago by now. That's very rude. Now I have to cast Disfigure immediately for them not to just caress it out of my hand anyway. Which is rough, because instant speed Disfigure is so much better than pre-combat Disfigure. No. Double removal, double removal. There's the Powerstone Fracture. They have fought through both our 6/5s, and we are super duper dead here. Just a bunch of really good value plays from our opponent. Yep, like the Hero of the Dunes, the Archaeologist Mightstone's animation. Stuff expanding their board and drawing them extra cards. Plus, a little bit of Flood from us here. I could Unearth the Cohort. I forgot about that. That would have given me one more turn. Because I can chump block the Refractor with the 1/1 Soldier token. But we still take 4 damage and go to 1 life. So, yeah, no combination of draws gets us out of that anyway. But that was a little preemptive. Just forgetting about the cohort stuff. Alright. And classic when you're in the Mythic ranks. 1 loss here in the end brings us from 599, 100 ranks down to 694. I guess 95 ranks down from that loss. 6-3 it is. Probably like the second saddest ending you can get. Obviously, anything that's under a 3-3 is always a disappointment to me, because I like to be at least average or better in the win rate. But honestly, 4-3s and 5-3s are a better time than a 6-3, because 6-3 is like you got so close, almost got the trophy run, but just didn't quite get there. Still think we did pretty well today. I really enjoy the deck that we drafted. I don't think I had the correct build from the start, running more of these Archaeologists, because our first 2 games where we were playing the first build, each time we just dirtled around so long and played so much self-mill that we almost milled ourselves. In the second game, we legitimately basically milled ourselves at the end to lose. So I really did like the swap of putting Aeronaut's Wings into the deck. This turns any of these creatures into extra damage and gives us more ways to actually close out this game. And then a Trench Stalker as well, just for another beef stick to top the curve off and try to beat our opponent. So I think this final build that we went with is a really, really solid, really good deck. Maybe if we were running this from the get-go, we wouldn't have lost our very first loss of the draft, and maybe that would have been the difference here, giving us the 7-2 run. Definitely played a little sloppy as well. This deck has lots of decisions to make, and there are a lot of places to go slightly wrong that'll add up over time. And I'm sure there was a lot of that going on. So a 6-3 run is still super respectable. And overall, again, really enjoyed the deck and the deck plan. The cards themselves all work together really well synergistically. We had plenty of action, plenty of stuff to do throughout all those games. So 6-3 it is. Sadly not getting the full trophy run, but still up in value out of this quick draft of the Brothers War. But that is going to end today's video. As always, I'd like to thank my patrons and YouTube members for their support, as well as you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video and are interested in seeing more, you can always like, comment, and subscribe to tell the YouTube algorithm to send you some more in your recommended feed. If you'd like to catch me live, you can check out the Twitch channel in the link in the description below. And if you'd like to support the channel directly, you can check out the Patreon link in the description below. But other than that, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for some more Magic Arena.